The Persian Gulf states love to invest in large infrastructures that seem humanly impossible. A perfect example is The Line, a 170-kilometer vertical city that the Saudi Arabian government will build to house 9 million inhabitants. But why do Middle Eastern countries seem so obsessed with constructing such impressive buildings? To understand Middle Eastern real estate investments, we need to think as if we were rulers of that vast expanse of land. You see, the Gulf countries are a bit different from most countries in the West, mainly because of their systems of government. Unlike the United States, Canada, Germany, and the rest of the world, the Gulf states are ruled by monarchies. Therefore, their rulers are wealthy men who finance ostentatious projects to give prestige to the royal family and their kingdoms. It's no news that since the origins of mankind, the most powerful have tried to demonstrate their wealth with gigantic constructions to last through time. Therefore, the bigger a building or statue is, the richer the person who built it must be. However, the ostentation of wealth is more normal in the Persian Gulf states than in the West, something that the world has been reminded of since the beginning of the FIFA World Cup. Today, it's estimated that the cost to finance this event exceeded $200 billion. Meanwhile, the second most expensive FIFA World Cup in history cost just $15 billion. This begs the question, why did Qatar spend so much money, especially if they're not very fond of soccer? The FIFA World Cup was the perfect opportunity to prove that Arab countries are capable of hosting massive international events. So the state spent a fortune to enhance its international reputation and demonstrate its purchasing power. But even before the FIFA World Cup began, the Gulf states were already investing in large skyscrapers and unique buildings. Examples include the Emirates Palace, which cost $3 billion to build, and the Abraj Al Bait, considered the world's most expensive building at $15 billion. Therefore, when we hear about Dubai, the first thing that comes to mind is a city full of luxuries and expensive cars. However, there are multiple reasons to explain why Arabs are so prone to spend so much money. Among them is the difference between new money and old money. New money is wealth that has been recently acquired. For example, a basketball player or a boxer from a poor family has just won a major competition. Many people who had to work hard to get what they wanted to brag about what they had achieved. That's why thousands of rap celebrities and lottery winners often spend their money on gold chains, luxury cars, and yachts, even if it is a financially unwise practice. On the other hand, the term old money represents all those who come from wealthy families or were born with a silver spoon. If you've had money all your life, you don't need to prove that you're rich. I can assume that if you saw a picture of Bill Gates with his back turned, the last thing you would suspect is that he's the owner of one of the most successful companies on the planet. Almost all the wealth in the Middle East and the Gulf states is new money. Although those responsible for financing the great skyscrapers are members of royalty, much of this wealth has been recently created. A few years ago, being rich in the Middle East meant owning a few camels and a big house. Before the discovery of oil, most Middle Eastern states consisted of nomadic tribes who made their living through non-industrial fishing, cottage industries, and pilgrimage tourism. However, successive oil and gas discoveries between 1938 and 1972 changed their world forever. The discovery of oil in the Arabian Peninsula transformed one of the world's poorest regions into one of the richest and most powerful. This is how a set of sandy deserts were transformed into a great metropolis with state-of-the-art technology. The miracle of oil transformed local leaders into immensely powerful men, and the world began to pay attention to a region that had been neglected for so long. As the Gulf states grew in oil wealth, local industries began to disappear. Since it was more profitable to invest in oil and gas than in other sectors of the economy, most state and private sector investments were channeled into energy-related businesses. Considering that most of the world found its oil reserves before the Arabs did, today, countries like Saudi Arabia have a greater say in international oil price negotiations than many other economies because they have not yet exhausted their reserves. As countries worldwide struggled to buy Arab oil and gas, the value of local currencies began to soar. Even so, the strengthening currencies made imports cheaper and local products more expensive. As a result, goods and services made in the Persian Gulf had great difficulty competing with the prices of Asian products, so the development of the manufacturing sector was held back. Meanwhile, the citizens of Middle Eastern states also contributed to the region's dependence on oil and gas. As the oil industry gained strength, workers began to look for jobs in a sector that offered better wages. All these factors led to oil and gas becoming the only viable industry in the region. Overnight, the Persian Gulf states became single-product economies tied to an oil and gas supply that sooner or later would eventually run out. However, just because the Arab states are rich does not mean that the average citizen is also rich. There's a small difference between the state's wealth and the working class's capital. Unfortunately, the media is more focused on showing the Arab sheiks and nobles who make an immense amount of money from selling oil rather than ordinary citizens. So, if you see videos of Arabs driving golden cars and owning exotic pets, you might think that all members of the Persian Gulf are equally wealthy. But unfortunately, that statement couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, it would be the equivalent of saying that all English people have as much money as King Charles III. Historically, oil-rich countries that provide large subsidies to the population instead of investing in new industries end up becoming economic failures. That is the case of Venezuela, the world's largest oil-rich country, which has become an example of what could happen to the Gulf states if they do not diversify their sources of income. Fortunately, the economies of the Middle East have been more astute. They have used the immense wealth produced by the energy industry to invest strategically in building more infrastructure. Today, the Gulf region has spent more on infrastructure development than the United States and Western Europe. Every year, Arab countries fund social projects such as universities and hospitals and infrastructure projects such as roads and airports. But despite this, nothing explains why the Arab states need a building like the Burj Khalifa, 2,720 feet or 828 meters high, valued at $4.1 billion, or what has led them to finance The Line. This is where things get interesting. The Arab states need people to think that they're as rich as they claim, because when the oil runs out, the royals will have to find new ways to make money. This is where the tourism industry comes in handy. If you wanted to have an inexpensive vacation, you could travel to Africa or South America. These regions have great natural beauty and much more affordable prices than we're used to paying in the West. But what if you wanted to show how rich you are? Few places in the world would let you show off your wealth like the Persian Gulf states. With so many beautiful buildings, the cities of the Middle East are the perfect place for celebrities, businessmen, and foreign royalty to show off their spending power. That's why all those big buildings you see on TV are focused on attracting these figures. However, even the average citizen who earns a little more than average can aspire to vacation in one of these large facilities. Naturally, not in the same way as an Arab sheik, but still enjoy a nice hotel with beautiful city views. Tourism is a money-printing machine. When we go to visit an unfamiliar city, we are much more willing to spend than if we were in our hometowns. People love to go to fancy restaurants, have fun, and enjoy the wonders of nature. But when your country is mostly made up of large expanses of desert, you need to find other wonders to make it more appealing. For example, Egypt boasts the Great Pyramids of its ancestors, so the Arab states have to boast some of the world's largest and most luxurious buildings. Creating gigantic projects is necessary to make the Persian Gulf states an attractive region. Since most foreigners know them as the place where people drive gold cars, they need to live up to their reputation. So that's how The Line was born. This linear city, which will cover 170 kilometers long, plans to house more than 9 million people. The plan for The Line was announced on January 10, 2021, by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in a presentation broadcast on state television. Earthworks began in October 2021, and the first residents were expected to move in during 2024. However, shortly after that, it was confirmed that the city would not be habitable until 2030. The project began in 2022 and is an attempt by the prince to diversify the kingdom's economy away from dependence on oil. The city is currently being built in Neom, in the Tabuk province of Saudi Arabia. The actual concept of the line was developed in 1882 by Spanish town planner Arturo Soria y Mata. Thanks to today's technology, many of the things proposed by Arturo have become possible. Nevertheless, the line is very different from anything we've seen. The city of just 34 square kilometers will seek to create a space where its inhabitants can live without roads, cars, or carbon emissions. The line promises to be a project that will run on 100% renewable energy. It's expected that 95% of the land will be preserved for nature. The line's objectives are to prioritize health and human well-being through a public transportation system, allowing travel from one end to the other in just 20 minutes. This dream city is part of the NEOM project. Even if it's not the first time governments have tried to combat global warming by building a green city, the line is much more utopian than its sister cities. Its design is based on the idea of overlapping city functions vertically so that inhabitants can move freely in 3 dimensions: up, down, or across. This unique idea makes it the first city in the world to apply the concept of zero gravity. In the line, public parks and pedestrian zones, as well as schools, homes, and workplaces, will overlap vertically, allowing citizens to move about to meet all their daily needs with utmost ease. In addition, the city's exterior will be clad with a mirror facade that will give it a unique character and allow it to blend in with nature. The line will consist of 3 layers, and artificial intelligence will monitor the city and use predictive and data models to find ways to improve the daily lives of its citizens. The project's developers claim that the climate will be different from that of the Saudi Arabian desert, as it will have the technology to influence temperatures throughout the year. Not content with this, they're also trying to create the world's smartest city and incorporate renewable water supplies to make it self-sufficient. If you've ever wondered what a futuristic city would look like, this is what the line aspires to become. Although the line promises to change the entire world, not everything is as it seems. Those a bit more skeptical have doubts about whether this project will ever see the light of day or become just another engineering feat abandoned in the desert. So far, we don't have much information about the architects in charge of the project. All we've seen are some impressive videos and images. Considering that the line will be a city with unique features in the world, the developers might have gotten carried away with the hype by setting such a close date. Don't get me wrong, the line is a fascinating project. I know that in the coming decades, most of the world's cities will have renewable energy sources and seek to be self-sufficient. This is a fact, as oil scarcity and global pollution will lead us to abandon fossil fuels. That is why today we have electric cars that no one thought possible. Therefore, we could be one step closer to seeing renewable energies dominate the market. The problem with the line is that it promises too much in too little time. Having a 100% smart city would already be a feat in itself. But if we add this to the fact that it will be pollution-free with glass walls that make it invisible to the environment and a system to regulate the temperature all year round, the chances of success are too low. Not to mention that the line aspires to become the world's first vertical city. If you think about it, none of the cities we live in today were built from one moment to the next. Instead, it was a process that took generations of hard work and investment by various governments, construction companies, and savers. But the line aims to surpass all these achievements in just 8 years. On the other hand, building such a huge project could generate far more emissions than it seeks to prevent. Some people are also concerned that the project will create an artificial dystopian facility. Even if all the things proposed by the line are technically possible, specialists are seriously concerned about the financial impediments. According to its designers, the city will cost between $100 and $200 billion. Yet, some estimate it could cost $1 trillion. Unfortunately, there's always the possibility that the project will end up being abandoned or will have to be lengthened. And every extra month it will take to create this architectural masterpiece will be another month in which the government will have to pay thousands of salaries. On the other hand, other experts point out that the line has already displaced the indigenous Huaytat tribe from their land. On April 13th, a man named Abdul Rahim Al-Huwaiti posted several videos on the internet alerting the world to an alleged attempt by Saudi security forces to evict him and other tribesmen from the ancestral lands to clear the construction site. If the project goes on, these families will lose their homes. Another problem that specialists point out is the location. Considering that the line will be built in the middle of the desert, there is a possibility that people will not want to move there. According to the government's plans, the line aims to allow the inhabitants to work and live in the same city. However, it makes the serious mistake of forgetting that many people do not work in the same cities where they live. That is why its location in the middle of the desert might not be ideal. Having to drive halfway across the desert to get to work is not exciting, and investors will figure that out sooner or later. Even the heavy reliance on vertical transportation could eventually become a problem. In fact, all the traffic that isn't on the streets could end up moving to the elevators. If the number of elevators is limited, the 5-minute commute promised by the line could end up becoming hours of waiting. But that's something the government doesn't want to talk about. We know that the line will be developed in modules, but it's not clear whether each of these will correspond to a neighborhood, nor how easy it will be to navigate the city or send a package without getting lost. Having a city built full of similar buildings may seem cool at first glance, but it could also cause people to quickly tire of seeing the same structures everywhere. There is a reason tourists pay to see the Eiffel Tower, the Burj Khalifa skyscraper, the Buenos Aires obelisk, and the Sydney Opera House, as the unique and distinct buildings give a city its identity. Even so, it's highly unlikely that the line will have any trouble attracting tourists, assuming it gets built. But what would happen if the line chose to have very uneven buildings? In my opinion, it could end up losing all its visual appeal. Since all the houses will be on top of each other, the owners would have to be faithful to the original design to make the city look as its developers had in mind. Ironically, one of the fun things about owning a property is being able to remodel it. But with a structure as rigid as the one proposed, all the houses could end up looking the same. During our research, we saw that the line's website made big promises, yet it neglects to mention the community structure, the diversity of household types, the likely demographics, and the rights of the people who will move to this land. What will happen to individual freedoms? Will the values of the immigrants be respected, or will they be forced to adapt? While we debate all its pros and cons, the construction of the line continues to attract the attention of thousands of investors. If the line succeeds, we could see similar large structures not too many years from now. And since only Arabs have so much money to finance such massive projects, they could also become the architects of tomorrow's cities. That's why the Arabs keep demonstrating that they're not afraid to innovate when constructing amazing buildings. And it may be this mentality why the Persian Gulf buildings are so impressive. But what's your opinion? Do you think the line is a possible project, or will it become another abandoned architectural feat? I'll be reading you in the comments. See you soon.